Welcome to In This Moment. I'm Janet Stovall, DEI strategist, joined by organizational culture expert Khalil Smith. We tackle the urgent questions in management and inclusion, exploring what's next and what you can do about it today. We're so glad you're here with us. Let's dive in. Today, we're talking about something that's reshaping every workplace: the fundamental shift between treating people as disposable costs while possibly investing in AI, and why the companies that learn to prove human value will actually dominate their markets.
Yeah, and some organizations are using layoffs as routine profit tools instead of as emergency measures. They're sometimes abandoning long-term people investment for quarterly results. But there's a massive opportunity for companies to get this right.
Zachary Nunn is the CEO and founder of Living Corporate. He's an experienced management expert who helps organizations use data to prove human value. He's seeing firsthand how the AI economy is changing the rules of work.
Yeah, and his message is really clear that capitalism assumes humans are disposable, but that companies that reject that premise and use data to prove human value will win. And the difference between information and insight determines who survives.
He focuses a lot on how historical patterns are repeating, but the cycles are speeding up. How everyone actually has to become an entrepreneur when traditional job security just disappears, and why understanding company financial data is now essential for career survival. He talks about how historical patterns are repeating, but the cycles themselves are speeding up. And he talks about how everyone must become an entrepreneur when traditional job security disappears. Let's get to it. Well, hi, Zach. We are so excited to have you and looking forward to this. So I'm going to dive right in and just ask you sort of a very targeted question. Looking ahead 24 months from where we are now, what do you see happening? Because organizations are increasingly choosing AI solutions over long-term people investment. What do you see happening over the next couple of years?
I'm not a fortune teller, right? But I don't see a world where that reality is sustainable. So if you look at like where we are economically, like there's so many people like ringing so many alarm bells, like, hey, the sky is about to fall, this bubble is about to pop, the markets are about to crash. You're seeing people continuously have to spend more while making the same or making less than they were. And so then, like, I don't know what sustainability looks like in a world where people have even less jobs than they do now. And I don't understand a market where you have increasingly decreasing consumer power. So, you know what I mean? Like, it's tough for me to imagine like that even happening. My hope and my prayer, really not say hope and my prayer, because I don't control corporate regulation or tech regulation. In fact, when you look at a lot of the laws and bills being put into place now, the ones that have been signed and the ones that are going to be signed, are actually decreasing regulation on some of these very technologies that we've yet to really fully appreciate or understand. And so I really believe if like we don't see a change in how organizations invest, if we don't see, frankly, like an about face, which I know we're not going to have an about face, but if we don't see a radical change in how organizations see human beings, namely the human beings that work in their organizations, I don't know like what the world of work looks like.
I think that there's an even greater fear of that because even though that's happening, technology is accelerating that. And people are terrified that their jobs are actually going to be replaced by AI. So we see that happening. Is that part of this? I mean, that's part of what's taking jobs, and should they be afraid of that?
You know, it's interesting. Like we just had on a woman on our Living Corpus podcast. She goes by the Job Chick, but her name is Amanda Goodall. And we were talking about the fact that like a lot of these companies are saying it's AI, right? So they're like, oh, well, we're investing in AI and it's helping to, to streamline processes and things of that nature. But like when you look behind the curtain a little bit, all of it can't be AI, right? In fact, like so much of this is not really necessarily like, oh, we found a bot to replicate your job one-to-one. A lot of it is we're just moving your job to the global south. Like we're offshoring your job. We're nearshoring your job. And we're looking for another group of people, oftentimes 99.9% of the time, who are not Americans or not people in this country, right? Like just say it that way. But not people in this country. And we're going to, because we can pay them, pennies on the dollar. And it will also do some AI, but really we're just not going to pay people anymore. Now, to that end, like, I think the question I continue to ask myself when I'm seeing these measures is just like, to what end?
And is that different? Does that feel different? Does the corporate world ever been, I mean, since the industrial age, when people kind of got replaced by machines,
Sure.
we've always talked about sort of the fact that people become expendables
Mhm.
and people are, your biggest cost center. Is that what it's always been the case, or is it just different now because there are ways to do it in mass?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? I think, look, I have the blessing, but I also have like the curse of being like 36. Like I'm not 56 or 66. So like I know a lot of times people like under 40, and now I'm under 40. I used to say I was under 30. God leave. But anyway, you get,
You keep moving the bar, my
keep
friend.
moving
Welcome
it
to
up.
our world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, it's like, younger people or youngish people will kind of like scream as if it's the first time something's ever happened, right? And I think like the beauty of having some wit time is like, well, no, you were alive. For people who were alive and working for the dot-com bubble and like who've seen different things like that happen. Obviously not people who were around like when the cotton gin was created. No, we're not talking about that. But I'm just saying like people who've lived through this before. I think the difference as someone who was not there or who was at least was not in the working world like at that time, like these other things where like when new technology was introduced, there's almost like this mass hysteria and like just demanded buy-in to this technology. And I would also challenge that like I don't know if we ever have seen like technology being implemented that has been such a failure in mass, right? So
Mm.
like when you look at like there's a recent MIT study that said 95% of organizations that have tried to implement AI have failed. That
Mhm.
AI it has not only not produced any meaningful return, but it also is like been like they've wasted money.
Mm.
So like
Yeah.
it's not like to your point, right? It's not like, oh, this is the like, oh, we've discovered trains or cars or even like the internet, right? This is not like
Mhm.
this like we have yet to really see effective and true use case for generative AI at the scale that they're talking about. Like, and that isn't to say that generative AI doesn't have use case, right? Like this is like this. I know we're just kind of getting to this pod, but like let me just say explicitly, like I am not even necessarily anti AI technology, generative AI
Agreed.
technology. I'm not, right? I think generative AI technology. And like we at Live in Corporate, we've built our own AI tools and solutions. We were building this stuff before it was in vogue. So like we use generative AI tools to help us ingest and transform our podcast library and turn it into an e-learning platform. So like we use AI technology custom to our needs, like custom tools that we've built to ingest large amounts of qualitative data to help organize and categorize and themify it for analysis that we take that data and we put it on top of quantitative data analysis like HRIS data and applicant tracking system data and operational finance data and marketing and sales data and customer experience data. But the point is like we use this technology and we believe it is effective and helpful. Where I start rolling my eyes is where people say like this is going to cure cancer. I think like now one thing it reminds me of, a mother-in-law who worked for NASA before she retired. She talked to me about the now I'm about to sound super young, but I'm not trying to. It was at the Hubble telescope.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So she was telling me about the Hubble telescope, and she was telling me how before the Hubble telescope, like she remembers before the Hubble telescope like went into space, they was
Mhm.
all like, "Oh, this is gonna do all these things." Like everybody thought it was gonna do like everything. People was like, it was gonna look
We were
into
going to
the
find new worlds and
yeah,
We'll be able to
yeah.
see
colonized
everything.
Then we're
Mars.
gonna see everything. We're gonna see the future. She said at NASA, people were so excited, just their minds went wild with like all the things they thought it could do. And then it came, and it's like, okay, hey, this is a really great telescope that we can like put into space and we can like see stuff. And it's not gonna be really pretty pictures, but it's gonna be things that we've never seen before because we're not in space. And so I think,
Exactly.
but I think like the difference in that era is there were these ridiculous, fanciful expectations because you were dealing with something that you could not imagine. So it's fair. Like now it sounds ridiculous to me at 36 in 2025 to go, why did you think you could see something in space with a space telescope? But to people back then, it's like, well, we never had a space telescope. So
We
what
never
do you
had that
mean? Like,
before, right?
so that's the difference though, is they had these expectations. The real thing happened and everybody kind of like, okay, well, this is what we have. Like this, now we're dealing in reality. My annoyance and my like my befuddlement in this season is no one has like that part hasn't happened yet of like, oh, we thought it could do this. It can't do all that, but it can do this. right? I think
Yeah.
like I'm waiting for like with this generative AI stuff, I'm just waiting for people to go, oh, it's like a smart college freshman intern. Like it's like
Mhm.
it can like do repetitive tasks. And if
Mhm.
I monitor it, it does an okay job. It's gonna make mistakes, but that's okay, right? And it's not like
It's not gonna replace human intelligence.
it's not it's well, and that's I think that's the thing is like it's just not intelligence. Like
Right.
what we call AI, what we're calling AI, it's this is not like Skynet from the Terminator or the Matrix or whatever. This is literally just code stacked on top of each other billions and trillions and quadrillions of times, right? And like it's
Mhm.
just patterns. I think that's the and math.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not actually thinking. It's just reaching out across the
It's
internet
aggregating.
and aggregating it for you in like a really like special in a way that makes you think there's some sort of intention when it isn't, right? I mean, I listen, y'all. Like I remember one time I put an Excel document together with conditional formatting, where it was like if you say this, the cell will turn green. If you say this, the cell will turn yellow. You say this, the cell will turn red. And like to some people that are not technically experienced or literate, that looked like the future. But in reality, it's like, hey, yo, this is just conditional formatting. Like I didn't like I took all your stuff and I just put these little rules in it. And watch this, when you type mango, it's gonna turn red. Like it's not a big deal. And like so
Mhm.
imagine like AI, like what we call AI, Chat GPT and these other like Grok and all these other things. It's just that, but like as opposed to it's just that, but like times a million. But the principles are still the same.
But the hype is incredible. And I do
Yeah.
think that, if we go back to using the Hubble telescope, the internet wasn't going to hype that. There were not people who had money invested and incentivized to hype this. So
Fair.
I just keep thinking, to your point, that the folks and the technology now seems it's very much concentrated in a few hands.
Yep.
And when those hands were NASA, a government agency, that was one thing. But when
Right.
those hands are human beings who have an incentive to make billions of dollars, it's slightly different. So yeah, they're gonna hype the hell out of it because more money, more money, more money. And I'm like you, I keep hoping that when the hype wears off and all these companies that have invested and all this stuff go, we spent how much money to do what? I'm hoping that hype dies down because a
Mhm.
lot of companies who have said they're gonna get rid of folks have to end up hiring folks back. Because
True.
guess what? The bots aren't that smart.
True.
And I think that's where I struggle the most is that even if the hype is real, to your point, Zach, what does that mean for the humans in the loop? What does that mean for the people? And so I've heard enough CEOs say, hey, listen, we don't know, right? To your point, it is like a really smart, college freshman or, an early, paralegal or a low-level coder that can take a bunch of these things. It can't do what these other folks can do. And yet the conversation still remains, even if it can transform your organization, what does that mean about the infrastructure and the people and the future of, how many folks you need to get stuff done? And is this about just kind of making your organization smaller, have people become replaceable? And I think that is some of it, right? Because when you say, listen, we use it in our space to do this and this and this and that, and we would have to get a lot of other people to be able to do that, or we would have to spend a lot more time to be able to do that. There are parts of that that are game changing for smaller organizations,
Sure.
larger institutions that are like, hey, listen, we used to have a million things on our intranet. Then we brought in an agent and now you can just ask it a question about your
Mhm.
benefits or, time off or whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
And yet still, I think for me, where I struggle is even if that is true, what does that mean about the people? And so even if this is the train, does that now mean that we don't care about anybody that's not on the train? And
Yeah.
so that is where, the question always comes up around the role of business, the role of society. We are very much, Janet and I, kind of anchored in business and what that means. There's an element of capitalism that is how do you extract, but that is the most kind of cynical form of capitalism, right? There is
Mhm.
still a form where you say, we need good people. We want the good people because good people will ask great questions of the AI that can then give us some of those answers and pull together some of those
Right.
things and help us see around corners and all of those things.
Right.
And so I wonder how much you're seeing organizations and what you forecast organizations, like, take the best ones, what will they be doing, even if this turns out not to be a bubble? It's not, you can see the future with it, but it's solid, it's good, it's supportive. What does that look like in the future for those organizations that are leveraging it appropriately?
Yeah, I think top organizations, to your point, they're going to see this technology as employee enriching and not employee replacing. And that's so much of, you know, what's happening with some of these other orgs, right? But I think top organizations are going to say, hey, okay, what are our processes? What does efficiency look like? And how can we leverage this technology to help either streamline this task or eliminate this task and then elevate this person or reprioritize this person in like a space where their expertise can shine, right? And so I think there's some work, right, that bots and automation and yes, explicitly generative AI explicitly can help with, right? But that does not mean that we get rid of this operations person or we get rid of this HR person, right? It's about being thoughtful and mindful of, like, what does this role really need to be successful? The challenge, though, Khalil and Janet, is that most organizations don't have like a 24-month or 36-month view anymore. Most organizations have like a 3-month view or
Quarter to quarter.
a quarter-to-quarter view. Maybe if they're very visionary, a 6-month view. But most times it's just quarter to quarter to quarter, which creates like this reactionary, almost jostling of an organization where you're like, you're moving down the road, but you're driving sideways to sideways. So you're not really going very far, right? And that's what's happened. That's what we're seeing. I'm curious. It's interesting because the current occupier of the White House talked about reporting out on a 6-month basis moving forward, as opposed to a quarterly basis. And there's one side of me that's like, wow, that's like going to create more avenues to fraud because you have y'all are decreasing regulation. And so then like there's going to be less incentive for any type of transparency. But then at the same time, I was like, well, like in a different world, I could see this being really powerful because other countries and businesses.
That's exactly it. Yeah. They report on a far less frequent schedule, which allows them to take a longer term view.
Right.
Yeah.
The only challenge I would say is like the regulatory and governmental and legislative context within some of these other companies that do that is much more stringent and engaged than America. For sure. So that's the part where it's like, dang, like, man, like in the right ecosystem, that could actually be a positive game changer. Because to your point, like, it's about like, okay, thinking through what these people need. Most people don't have time. Like by the time you sit down and you want to do an analysis on what do our employees need, you've already cut through like a third of your quarter. So you need time.
Yeah. It's sort of like when I think about, when computers became a thing. Now, I am going to age myself. I remember.
Zach's like, I can't really talk about the Hubble telescope. But Janet's like, when computers came on the scene.
When I graduated from college, I had never touched a computer. My first job was going to program mainframe computers. So I had to make that leap pretty quickly. But so I can program a mainframe computer from 1985. Don't get me wrong for now. They don't have mainframes anymore. When I think about the difference, I thought I was the bomb because I had a good electric typewriter.
Yeah.
And could I turn in a paper? Absolutely. But did I have to have whiteout fluid and that kind of stuff? Mine could actually use backspace and do it. So yes, the computer came and it didn't take away the ability that you had to have somebody smart enough to use it and to write things. I'm a writer. Okay, I'm a writer. And yes, will I use AI to do research? Absolutely. But if I ask AI to write something, I can look at it and go, I know who wrote that.
See?
And so that's what I'm hoping. And that's sort of what you hear as people saying, well, there's certain jobs that will never go away. And I'm thinking maybe there are a lot that won't go away because AI lies, it hallucinates, and it does it 10 toes down with absolute certainty. It will say something.
It does. Would be dead wrong.
Dead wrong.
You said something just now about like the typewriter. I remember, so I was born in 1989. So like I remember though, when I remember my mom, so I didn't grow up with a computer in my house either. Like, so my mom and I, we were like lower middle class. So my mom had the first thing I remember her writing on was also an electric typewriter. It was very loud. It was like, taka, 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 taka. And I remember she had that, the whiteout and everything. And I recall us pivoting from a typewriter to bringing in that big computer monitor, right?
Yep.
And then
Yep.
time went on, and then we got a laptop. We had dial-up. So I remember that, yeah, the computer and a keyboard, it didn't remove anything. And my mom was also right. My mom was also an English teacher. So she's over here writing grants and grading papers and using all the using the internet for turn it in and all that kind of stuff. And so it that helps streamline it. I think the challenge is, I'm gonna say this too because y'all are fun and I want to give y'all something viral to share. So I'm gonna say this,
Ah,
right?
oh
So
boy.
no. I think my challenge is like, when you think about technology and you think about innovation, Silicon Valley, like white tech bro culture hasn't actually like contributed much in the past like 20 or 30 years. And like, so you have like Steve Jobs who made the iPhone, like you have like, you can be like, well, what about this and what about that? Like you can call it like maybe a handful of people, but by and large, tech bro culture is really about taking Black invention and like just stealing it or copying it poorly or right. So like even when you talk about AI, right, we can talk about like so much of generative AI is just like the global south behind the screen, like just typing for you, right? Like these robots AI robots that people think are like these autonomous things. There's like someone in like India, South Asia, just like with a headset on moving, right? Like it's not so much of it is just like some version of slavery reimagined over and over again. And I think like we have to be thoughtful and careful about when we see a bunch of people who have not innovated anything come to the stage and go, look at this thing that's going to change the world. I believe it's wholly appropriate to ask, what's the track record on your innovation, right? Because like when you talk about computers, like Janet, you just talked about you like designing, like coding for a mainframe and like writing code. Okay, but like there was a bunch of Black women involved in that. Like there's a like
We saw it.
like our history is involved in that. When you talk about like so much, even like the Hubble telescope, what I was talking about earlier, like so much of that was like there was a diverse, rich history of Black and brown people, diverse people, women, people all across the margins coming together to build something. I don't know. I'm hesitant when I see a very exclusive, homogeneous group of people, specifically white men, come and say, "Look at this technology that we've pulled out from clay and breathed into." And I question that. And I'm gonna be honest. Like, again, I'm not 80, but I'm also not 15. Like I've seen enough. I haven't really been wrong yet. And I get really nervous. And like, even when you talk about all this technology, like, man, like look at the amount of water that it takes to even create this cat riding a surfboard wearing a sombrero. Think about all these Black and brown communities, specifically Black and brown communities that are being completely destroyed, right? For just stupid stuff. So think about like we talked about earlier, MIT, 95% of these projects, these AI projects have failed. 5%, y'all. Not because think about like 95% is such a stunning, to me, is like such a stunning, like if your mom, I'm gonna speak about my mom. So my mom is from Jackson. Really, my mom's from Ridgeland, Mississippi, but it's close to Jackson. My mom went to Tougaloo. My dad went to Jackson State. But my mom is a phenomenal cook. And she also, for Thanksgiving, sometimes she'll bake a pecan sweet potato pie. Okay, so she'll take it and put it together. So
You
it's
sound like you can taste it right now, Zach.
it's delicious. Shout out to my mom, Valerie Kendrick. I love you. But think about like if your mom says she made you a pie and you go home and 95% of it is gone. You know how much that is? Like that's a stunning amount of something to be missing, right? And so you talk about 95% of these projects have failed. Oh, 95% of these projects have failed or have shown themselves to be a waste of time and money, have not shown any financial return. And yet like you have all these people who don't have water, have cancer. You have all these lands that are completely like just like they're unfarmable now. You have Black folk, like it's so much harm and damage from something that we have yet to see a real return of. At least like when you talk about like these batteries, these EV batteries, tons of damage from these EV batteries. At least I can point to something and go, okay, but there's a tangible product. There's a solution. This is creating something. Now we can debate the harm. It's creating objective harm. At least I can say, okay, well, we can have some type of conversation about exchange. But with AI, as it is today, the exchange is so lopsided. It's like, hey, we should just stop using this altogether, right? Like this is not like and again, like I say this still trying to be somewhat like open to it, but it's just so harmful that it's like I I think I imagine a world where we're just so much more regulated with this stuff because we only have so much we only have so much planet, y'all. Like there's only so much, and like we don't talk. It's not mainstream news because it's black folks, it's black communities being impacted by it, right? The
Yeah.
minute that the woodlands over in Houston get impacted, or Vermont, or wherever white folks live, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like then we're gonna have actual news. But today it just doesn't matter because we sweep black and brown communities under the rug. So, those are the things I think about when I look at all these headlines. I'm just like, where are we going?
Well, one of the things we talk about often, like Khalil said, we're very based in the corporate world, and we talk about the value of diversity. And so what's very interesting about what you're saying that, is kind of insightful for me is it would be ridiculous based on everything we know about the value of diversity to drive innovation. It would be ridiculous to assume that a homogeneous group is the only one that's doing it. So to your point, there's a whole lot of diversity sitting behind that. And once again, I think the issue is the value of AI is concentrated in very few hands, and the idea of value is return on financial investment. So when we talk about the bigger value of it, then that's the problem. It's like 2-3 people are getting value out of it, but it's the financial value, and that's it. So, but the diversity is there. You just don't see it.
No, 100%. I mean, and that's the norm for tech, especially of like
Mhm.
the modern tech era. Is we're gonna put a bunch of white men in front, but all the real minds and genius is really these black and brown people that we've either hidden behind the curtain, or they're somewhere else. They never even come to California or come to our
Mhm.
main site, but they're the ones doing all the work. I think like what's crazy is like American capitalism, which is like really, I don't know, Khalil, you were talking about earlier about like different state forms of cap. I think that is like the most creative thing I think that white people have made. It's like this version of capitalism, like the barbaric extraction of everything. Like, we're going to take your time, your labor, your insight, your wisdom. We're going to take your love, your passion, and we're going to take it, and we're going to then like diminish it and then resell it back to you. That's like the most creative thing that I believe white people have exclusively made, right? That's really what the tech industry is, like, over and over and over again. Like, they just like continue to figure out very creative ways to extract and then tarnish and then resell it. And that's kind of where we're at. And so like I get nervous when I see companies, especially now, right? So like there was a time when Google was like the place to work. You was excited to work at Google. People was talking about your googliness and talking about, they had that movie with my man with the nose. You go, "Oh wow, who was that guy?"
I know what you're talking about. I can't
Oh
put it in
wow,
it. Yes,
Owen
I know what
Wilson.
you're talking
Owen
about. Yes.
Wilson. So you
Yeah.
had Owen Wilson, and there was another guy next to Owen Wilson, Van something, tall man. Anyway, there was a whole movie.
Vince Vaughn.
Vince Vaughn, come on, Khalil. So you got Vince Vaughn and Owen Wilson, and they're like, and like the whole thing is a huge ad for Google, and nobody cared because Google was so cool. Like,
Mhm.
fast forward now, Google is not the place of innovation. Google is
Yeah.
not the home for diversity, be it diversity of thought, quote unquote, which is another crazy term, or real diversity of like experience and all. Like, it's just it's completely different. And so like so much of what Google now is doing isn't really about like innovating and changing and helping the world. It's about partnering with like genocidal state regimes and like creating surveillance technology and exporting war, or partnering with the state. Like, it's just a completely different space. And like I said, I get concerned because like when you start taking away from these organizations, it's almost like the character and conscience of the companies dramatically change.
Well, and I want to pivot there because, one of the things, again, we always talk about kind of what's next, and then we talk about what's now. So if we assume that some of the things that are happening around AI are going to continue, it'll pivot, it'll shift, we'll, kind of figure out how to make more successful all of that. How do you make sure that you are preparing today to create that organization where people still have a role to play, still have a central part of the culture, are leveraging the technology appropriately, are
Yeah.
still kind of central to the discussion and the culture of the organization, and
Yeah.
not being replaced by the technology, whatever that technology may happen to be?
Yeah. So I will put on my change management hat. So like my background, a large part of my background is in change management. I did that work at some fairly global consulting firms for a decent part of my career. So you asked the question of what should organizations do? So again, you want to identify the people in your organization, from like your senior executives to your individual contributors. You want to understand and really understand your processes, your current state. So your current processes, your current technologies, your current operations. You want to then understand you understand this new technology, and then start doing a one-to-one. Okay, well, what's the impact? What does this technology mean for this process? And be as granular as possible, right? It's going to take you some time to run this analysis. But when you talk about effective change management, it's about doing that work. Like, it's asking all those questions. So often right now, CEOs, there was some CEO just the other day who said, we have 1,200 people here. I don't know what most of them do. And I was like, okay, well, it's probably projection. He's like, we don't need all those people who work in. So that sounds like a projection on your part. I don't think all these people need you working here. I don't know if you could say you don't need all these people working here. So you need to take the time and like do the work. Stop being trifling and lazy, which is another part of executive leadership, which is a whole separate pod, y'all. But do the work. Hey, okay, this is going to affect this process in this way. And this is going to be a small change, a medium change, a large change, or an extremely large change. And you're going to do that over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And that's going to, you might have like 1,000 change impacts, right? And then you have to ask yourself, okay, so what are we going to do for these really big changes? We might have to make some personnel decisions, or we have to make some policy decisions. We have to make some other like large swath, huge changes, right? That everybody's going to feel. For some of these small changes, maybe it's just, we're going to send out a memo. We're going to send out an email. We're going to put together whatever. And so over time, like that plan of understanding of the impact of the changes, who's going to be impacted by it, and what you're going to do about it, from policy to training, communications, that's your change management. And that's going to take you some time. It's going to take you, change management first of all, change management is a way of leadership. It's not a moment in time, but like that, what I just articulated is probably going to take you like 18 to 24 months, right? And you're going to have to.
Well, to your point, it's cyclical, right?
It's
because
cyclical.
You
Come
still
on,
don't
Khalil.
stop. And so that the change is never ending. So you need to continue to have those conversations around what's changing, how's it changing, who's it changing for, what's the level of impact, what's the level of readiness. And then you do it again and again and again. And that's why, to your point, it's fundamental to the leadership. It's not something that you can necessarily completely extract. And so just the same way, we talk about this, you pull out operations, you pull out marketing, you pull out a bunch of these things because you have people who kind of excel, or that is their discipline, but then you need to weave it all back together.
Yeah.
And so you may have some people for whom change management, it's an art, it's a science, they know how to do it better than everybody else, they are your subject matter expert, and yet still, if you are deferring that to them or abdicating your responsibility as a leader, it's never going to get done, because you can articulate all of those changes and all the things that need to happen, but if the senior leaders don't care, it's not going to move.
1,000%. 1,000%.
So then, what do you recommend for the individuals?
Yeah, there we
because
go.
That's for the organization, right? You got to evaluate, you got to do all of this. For the individuals, what do you do when you're saying, okay, there's all of this hype around AI, maybe it's real, maybe it's not. My organization, I don't know what their temperature and appetite is for all of this.
Yeah.
What should I be doing either to prepare myself or to prepare my organization or to just be ready for whatever may be coming?
Yeah, so first thing you got to do is just like, against what I read, like during the Cold War, you just got to get under your desk, you know what I'm saying? Grab your knees, kiss your butt goodbye. All right, it's over. You know what I'm saying? No, what you really got to do is you got to, it's important, I believe, to recognize the moment. And so I'm going to start there, right? In that, when I came into work in 2011, I was presented this world of loyalty, corporate investment. Hey, you're going to have here's a 3, 5, 7-year roadmap. Here's the paths you can go on. And we want you to be here. And this is a community, this is a family, this is a space for you to be successful and grow your career. I think it's important, if employees don't understand this now, to reset themselves on the reality that is not the world of work today. You are, irrespective of what they tell you, you're a contractor, right? You are here for a season. You could be gone in a season. And so it's important to stay. And so with that being said, it's important to keep your resume up to date. It's important to stay engaged and learned on trending technology and tools and certifications. And it's important to be mindful of what the market is doing, what your industry is doing. And so if I was in the industry today, if I wasn't focused on living corporate full time, that's what I would do. I would ask my leadership questions, but I would also like embrace the fact that, hey, layoffs and downsizing and offshoring are not last ditch efforts anymore. These are common cords that people are now pulling to continue to drive shareholder value, and to appease and satisfy their corporate boards. And so I'm going to be studying. I'm going to be looking for, AI prompt engineering certifications. I'm gonna maybe on my again. I'm a fairly entrepreneurial person, but I would like build out. So I might build something and have like a little project I have to myself, just to have like a portfolio to show people like, here's something I can do, or I'd like to do. Or I'm just showing you that I have the capacity to do something, with this technology, right? But it's about making yourself as current and relevant so that you can not only be a benefit, and it could potentially, I'm not going to say it will, it could potentially reduce the odds of you being impacted by a cut, or if you get cut, then perhaps it can help accelerate you finding something else.
Absolutely. And part of what I hear you saying, and what I'm taking away from it, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I take away from it is be prepared, don't be afraid.
Come on.
Because I think sometimes you see people acting out of fear, and there's this, what if I lose this? I need to hold on to this. And that can create adverse effects inside the organization, because if the three of us are all working together, but we're afraid there's only going to be 2 seats when the music stops, right? We've got international listeners as well. So we have this musical chairs, right? You pull one chair away, there's only 2 chairs for 3 of us. When the music stops, whoever's not sitting in a chair is out of the game. And that scarcity, that fear can drive behaviors in an organization that are suboptimal for all of us.
Right.
But if we're doing our due diligence and we say, hey, listen, I built my network before I need my network. I'm building my skills before I need those skills. I'm staying aware of what's going on. I'm clear and articulate about the value that I'm adding. Then if the worst does come and my boss calls me and says, hey, Khalil, we love what you've done, but the time is right to move on. And Zach, to your point, I think the rationale sometimes has changed. But you said before, technology has always made some positions redundant. It's, I don't... There was a very finite period of time where lifelong employment was the expectation. Yeah. For far more than that, it's been, I give you money, you give me a resource. If I stop giving you money, you stop coming to work. If you stop coming to work, I stop giving you money. If I can get somebody else to do it for less, then I'll get that. Like, there's always been this transactional nature to some of these things. And that doesn't mean that there's not also a relationship to a degree. Because I've met some people who are some of my closest friends. They didn't start out as friends. They started out as colleagues that we needed to get work done together.
Sure. No, 1,000%. And it's funny to your point about like just being scared, because I remember I was in an energy company, and they were talking about rolling out some new, it was either like a workforce, it was either like an ERP solution. It was some technology, but I remember one of the employees who was like, she had been at the company for like 10 years. And she went to our boss and like was in tears, like, please, I don't want to lose my job. And I remember, first of all, like black people, we can't even do that. So I was like, wow, that's crazy. And I was like 23 at the time. So I definitely was like, wow, I would never think to be that emotional at work. Like, no shade to you being like, wow, what freedom it is, what privilege it is for you to cry like that at work. But she walked away, and I remember my boss looking at her like, and I did not help her down the road, right? As things were rolled out, because it was like, oh, this person is, she's not engaged. Now, going back to something you said, though, Khalil, like, I agree with you. I think the challenge though is like, for me, as someone my parents are baby boomers, and so like so often this goes beyond race. Like, certainly black folks do, but like baby boomers period is like, hey, you get a job, keep that job.
I think to your point, the generational shifts that continue to happen,
right,
because they're predictable, right? Like, they've seen online all these times of people being like, oh, this generation is lazy and entitled and so on and so forth. And then you go back and it's an article from Time magazine in like 1945 talking about,
same conversations, facts.
Same conversation, right? That these are elements of your life. These are times where, before I had responsibilities, quote unquote, after I had children, after I had my career, after I had something to lose, so on and so forth. Maybe you become less risk, seeking. Maybe you become, more conservative in whatever, fashion that means. But I think that increasingly folks have recognized what you're talking about, Zach, which is the social contract has changed.
Right.
And so we may lament what it was before and say, hey, there's no real commitment to the individual, that the companies are complaining and lamenting there's no real commitment to the organization. And so it has become this like, And I feel like there are a handful of those companies out there that are trying to say, no, 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 this is still a community. It's not a family. I
Right.
often tell people,
Not your family.
the metaphor of your workplace as a family falls apart very, very quickly
Quick.
and can be used unintentionally or not to try to emotionally manipulate people, right? We're a family. You got to come in on the weekends. We're a family. Answer emails at 3 a.m.
Right.
But when times are tough, it's not, we're a family, so we're all going to take a pay cut, or we're a family, so we're going to kind of bound through it together. But I think that metaphor of a community, which is like, hey, listen, we live next to one another. You need to keep your yard clear, because if not, I have to look at it. And ultimately, when we all come together and we support one another, this place can thrive. But you go back to your house, you go back to your house. Sometimes this person's going to move. This person's going to do their own thing. I find that to be a more apt analogy. But again, it is yeah, I'm here because this is the place that I feel like I need to or want to be right now. And when that's no longer the case, I move on to that next thing. But that requires what you're describing, which is be prepared, right?
Yeah.
Build your network, build your, all of these things that you accumulate in terms of financial freedom and, education and skills and credentials and so on and so forth, reduce the role that luck plays in all of these things, because it is absolutely clear that some people can find jobs faster than others because they put it, hey, just got let go. I know you were talking about this. Don't forget I did that. Loved working with you together here. Who do you know that might be able to support with this thing? I think the challenge part of what you're describing as well is when it's en masse, right? And so if it is happening across entire industries and AI is being either credited or blamed for that, that's the place where I think it gets really tough, because if there are no more marketing jobs, it doesn't matter how good you are at marketing. If, company after company has said, oh, well, they did it, so we're going to do it. Oh, now
Right.
both of them did it, so we're going to do it also.
Right.
And I encourage leaders not to follow the leader, right? Like, do the thing that is right for your business, because you may be following them off a cliff.
Don't get me started. It's so interesting. Like, that is the mantra of many organizations, which is, well, what are our competitors doing?
Yeah.
Or, well, what is this big brand doing that we have deluded ourselves into thinking we are? Okay, we're going to do that too. And it's like, man, you have an opportunity. And I think that's the sad part of this corpo fascist seat moment that we're in. Is so many people are just obeying in advance, or just doing what they're told. And it's like, hey, what happened to people being like, hey, no, we are an institution. We have resources. We're actually worth billions of dollars. We don't have to do what these other 20 people are doing. We can actually create something really different and do what we want to do, or we can have a different point of view. I think that idea, to your point, Khalil, there's just a lack of curiosity and courage, frankly, just to do something different.
So that was an absolutely incredible conversation. Lots that we took away. I know you and I were both nodding, get fiery all over the place. That was an amazing discussion with Zag. And as always, we do our 3 key takeaways. And, one of the ones that I know we were talking about and thinking about is this idea of rejecting disposable thinking, right? That capitalism can assume that humans are disposable, that employees are disposable, but companies that are using data to prove people-centered approaches drive results are going to dominate the markets where competitors are cutting really valuable talent out of their workforce.
And the key takeaway that came from me that basically builds on that is, if that's what's happening, if you really think people are being seen as disposable, it's important that we all become entrepreneurs. We always have to think about ourselves and what we can do and build our networks now when we don't need them, because traditional job security might really be going away. So we have to position ourselves as people who can generate revenue rather than cost money. And we got to learn to just read this room a little bit differently and build our networks and prepare before we need to.
Yeah, and use that term prepare, and I know we talked about it quite a bit, this idea of being prepared, not being afraid. And so, as you say, whether that's around, building your network, whether that's around kind of, understanding what comes next, that you don't need to run around scared, but you do need to make sure that you're being very thoughtful and prepared for what comes next. And so, as always, 3 key takeaways from an incredibly dynamic conversation that we probably could have had 50 other takeaways. And, we look forward to hearing from our viewers and listeners what are some of their key takeaways. But that wraps us up for this particular episode of In This Moment, and looking forward to all of the other conversations that we're continuing to have both on these podcasts and not.
See you soon. Thanks for joining us on In This Moment. Find today's resources at inthismoment.network and connect with us on LinkedIn. And if this was valuable, subscribe and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcast. It helps other leaders find us. Stay ready for what's next.